This is our notes from church today. Our messy table, because we didn't put our groceries away. Oh look, it's Super Jesus now. Pastor was right about everything he said.
Howdy y'all, Random Lady here, and it's time for another story of my life. I want to talk about times when I have been just an average superhero. And there have been a few times. And the first one I want to tell you about is how one day I was driving to work. And I'm driving along, and I see something out of the corner of my eye. And I'm like, did I really just see that? Is that what my brain is processing, what I saw? And so I turn around and go back. And yes, what I saw was true. There was these two little kids, and they were little, and there was no adults around. And there was this big bag of charcoal in the middle of their front yard, sparkling with fire. And they were running around it, crying. I thought, oh my gosh. And then the mom comes out, and she doesn't speak English real good. She's Hispanic. And she's like, my husband in house. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And by that time, another lady had done the same thing I had, and she pulled up. And we look at each other, and we start to run into the house as another lady pulled up. And she said, I'll call 911. We're like, okay. We run into the house, and by then, smoke is starting to billow out. The thing they tell you not to do is run into a burning house. Well, we didn't see flames yet, so I guess it was okay. You know, that didn't cause our mind. Me and this other lady, we just want to help this man. And so we run into the house, and he's this huge, big, bulky guy, and he's like, my house. And we're like, you can't worry about that right now. Your family's outside. They're safe. You need to come out and be safe. And he goes, but my house. And she and I are trying to take him each by an arm. And then he had too much smoke inhalation. I don't know if I'm saying it right. And he falls out. And we look at each other. And we're like, oh my gosh. And we're hacking and coughing. And we're like, well, we got to get down low anyway, because this smoke is really bad over our heads when we get down. And we're like pulling on him. It's like he had to be a big guy. And we're pulling him, and we can't get him out. And we're pulling on him, and she's got one arm and the other, and we're like, and do you know how hard it is to pull this big, huge guy while you're crawling on the floor, coughing and choking on smoke? And thankfully the firemen come in, and they're like, get away, we got him. So she and I run out of the house, and we're like, can you believe this? And we never exchanged names or anything. The mom's hanging on outside, hanging on to her kids, and the mom's not even really dressed. She's got like a t-shirt and underwear, and that's it. And the guy, he only had like Bermuda shorts on, so you know, they were just relaxing around the house. And the dumb guy, I'm sorry to be mean, because here he had risked his life and his family because he wanted to barbecue in the house. That's what I found out from the firefighters. And only because they didn't come and approach me and tell me this, I heard them over talking. But anyway, while all this chaos was going on, the fire guys were going in, and the lady and I, by now we had the black suit all over us from pulling on that guy. And we're standing by the fire trucks just waiting. And then they all come out, the firemen, and by then they've got it under control, they said, and that's why we overheard them talking. And we're waiting for somebody to come talk to us, and no one ever did. And so the lady and I are like, I guess they're not going to talk to us. So she and I each get in our cars and go our separate way. Needless to say, I was late to work. And they were like, oh, Susan, you're late to work. And I said, you know what? I was saving a man from his burning house. You know, who's going to believe their coworker who says that? You know, like, I have a good reason for being late to work. I was saving a man from his burning house. And they're like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, look at the stains on my shirt. And they're like, whatever. You could put those stains on your shirt. So, yeah. Here I did this superhero thing, saving this man from his burning house. Well, I tried to. And I got in trouble for being late to work. And kid you not, a week later, on my day off, I was going to take a drive to my favorite used bookstore. So I'm driving along. There's no traffic because everybody else in the world is at work because it's a weekday. And there's a car in front of me, and all of a sudden that car goes sideways like this in front of me off through a red light. And I don't know how I knew, but alarms went off that this driver's not being rude. This driver's in trouble because they're about to drift into oncoming traffic. So I immediately follow them. Yes, through the red light. And thankfully, the median in the big curb, medium in the island is what some people call it, in the middle of this way traffic and this way traffic, stopped the car. And then I pull up behind it. I put my flasher blinker lights on. Hazards, that's what they're called. I put my hazard lights on to, you know, from any traffic coming this way. Hopefully they'll see my car with... Anyway, I jump out and I run up to her and I see the woman laying in the driver's side having a seizure. And I immediately throw the door open and I reach in over her legs and I smash the brake. And I'm trying to throw it and drive, but I can't quite because I'm, you know, and she's laying there, you know, having her seizure. And I'm like on top of her, keeping that wheel straight and mashing on the brake. And thankfully this young man comes walking up the road and I'm like, hey, you, can you come help? She's having a seizure. So he comes running. And while I'm holding the wheel straight and mashing on the brake, I said, could you throw it and drive and grab her keys? And so now he's on top of, I'm on top of her while she's having her seizure. He's on top of me reaching through the steering wheel and puts it was hard for him, but he puts it in park and he grabs the keys and takes them out. And we're like, whew. And we turn around and we watch her. And by then, her seizure finished and she's like almost coming out of like being passed out or something. And she looks at these two strangers looking down at her. And we're like, are you all right? She looks around and she goes, what happened? And I said, you were having a seizure and you were driving and your car almost went into oncoming traffic. She looks and realizes where her car is and sees that I'm telling her the truth. And I said, do I need to call 911? And she's like, no, do not call 911. I said, well, is there a family member I need to call? No. I said, well, you can't be okay to drive. Yes, I am. And she was angry. She was angry with us. And so the young man's like, I'm out of here. So he jogs off. And I'm like, are you sure? She's like, I'm fine. Give me my keys. And she puts her keys and drives off. Excuse me. And shuts her door. And so I run back to my car and I shut my door. And she takes off and I kind of follow her a little bit. And I'm following her, not following her. It's just that we're going the same direction, just like we were before she started having her seizure. And yeah. And it turns out that she was going to the exact same used bookstore I was going to. So she was probably convinced that I was following her all the way because I'm behind her. We make the same turn into the same parking lot. And she parks and she's kind of sees me park. She goes walking into the bookstore as fast as she can. So I'm strolling into the bookstore. And she's still looking behind her. And I think she really thought I was following her. But we just happened to be going to the same place. So I was trying. And this was a big used bookstore. They also sold vinyl records and cassette tapes and all this. It was a huge collection. So it was like a 2-story bookstore. And so, but when you're upstairs, it was really old store too. So when you're upstairs, you could see through balconies downstairs and stuff. It was a really cool place, actually. And she's looking up at me, and I'm trying not to look down at her. And I'd grab a book just as she's looking at me, trying to make it real obvious. Look, I'm not here for you. This is where I was coming anyway. So anyway, there's a couple of stories where I actually got to be a superhero. And one last story is I actually got to be a superhero for one of my coworkers on the job. We worked for this company. It was actually Greyhound Lines, which is the very popular express bus that people ride all over the nation. And their headquarters were in Dallas, Texas. And I worked in the mailroom. And I had a coworker named Dior who also worked in the mailroom. Now, because the headquarters were located there, on one of the higher up floors was the heart of the business in their IT department. And it was a great big floor with all the computers and all the lights and levers and beep, 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 beep. And it was kept cold because of all the electronic equipment. And you had to push a button, and we had lanyards, and we had to scan and everything just to get into the room. And on your way out, there's a certain kind of button that you had to push, a big red button on the wall you had to push to leave as well. Now, next to that big red button was a big red button, an emergency stop button, and it was kept in one of those it was kept locked up in one of those clear plastic cases that you would find sometimes over a thermostat in public places and things, because they don't want people to mess with a thermostat. Well, this particular button was kept in one of those. And there was one day I was delivering something in the IT department, and as I was leaving, I looked over and I saw the case was open and lifted up. And I'm like, oh, I better make sure I push the right button to get out the door. And I remember thinking that and going, and as I'm walking out the door and thinking, what a stupid design. Why would they put these two buttons next to each other? That is ridiculous. You're asking for trouble to put an emergency stop next to an exit button that look very similar to each other. And I couldn't quite find a picture of an emergency stop button quite like the exit button, but they looked very much alike. And so I go on my merry way. Well, hours later, all the computers go down. And it turned out they didn't just go down in our building. The computers for all of Greyhound Lines all over the nation had been shut down. And in doing some investigating and looking for blame, the blame was put on my coworker Dior after he delivered something to IT after I did, and he pushed the emergency stop button by accident because he is blind in one of his eyes. And the story behind that was, he said as he was a kid, his sister pushed him down the stairs and his eyeball actually got popped out, and as a result he lost his vision in that one eye. Well, that was the eye where the buttons were located, and because that lockbox was open and lifted up and there was access to the emergency stop button, he's like, oh man, I'll see you later. Pushes the wrong button, doesn't think anything about it. Pushes the right button and leaves, doesn't think anything about it. And that's when the crisis started. And so they were going to fire Dior, but they were still investigating. And so they looked at the logs and said, oh, we see that Susan had made a delivery just right before Dior did. Let's see if she saw anything. Because Dior was insisting, I accidentally pushed the wrong button. And they're telling him, how could you accidentally push the wrong button when the box is locked? You would have to lift it up to push the button. So they were really trying to accuse Dior of lifting the box and pushing the button because, hey, he was just a mail clerk and they're expendable, right? I was able to be a witness to say, oh no, I almost did the same thing. because the lockbox was lifted up and it was just out of the corner of my eye. And when I reached, I went, boy, I'm going to make sure I push the right button because that lockbox was up. And they're like, oh, okay. And because I was able to witness that, Dior's job was saved. Just an everyday hero. No, I don't want to be all conceited or anything. It's just, thank goodness that it was there. Thank God that, that was able to happen and Dior was not fired for something that was really not his fault. IT was responsible for keeping that box locked. And so it ended up being that Dior was not let go. He was able to keep his job. And I'm curious as to, have you had any chances where you got to be a superhero? I want to hear about them. Could you type your stories down in the comments below? I'd really like to hear about my everyday superheroes that are watching me. And if you could do me a favor so that I know what's going on, could you hit the like button? And so that you know what's going on, could you hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell? And that will let you know when I put out videos. I usually put them out every Monday and no set time really. But here lately I've been doing them even beyond Mondays. So you'll need to be notified when I put those videos out. Thank you so much if you made it this far with me. I appreciate you. You have an awesome day and take care, alright? Bye. Inhalation. Flash your blinker lights on. Hazard. He's like, no. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, okay.